Yartsevo, a small town whose name is forever etched in the history of Eastern Europe with the blood of thousands of soldiers. Situated on an ancient trade route, this settlement became a key point of resistance, where two powerful war machines clashed. The strategic importance of Yartsevo was determined not only by its geographical location on vital transport arteries, but also by its role as the last line of defense before the further advance of German troops deep into the territory. Here, amidst the forests and swamps of the Smolensk region, a drama unfolded that changed the course of military operations. The positional crisis that arose as a result of stubborn resistance posed the most complex tactical challenges for the command of both sides. The battles for Yartsevo became not just a local military clash, but also a catalyst for diplomatic processes in Europe. How will the Western powers react to the changing balance of power? What lessons will military strategists learn from this bloody confrontation? And most importantly, what price will have to be paid for every meter of recaptured land? The city of Yartsevo, located on the Vop River, 113 kilometers from Smolensk, occupied an exceptional strategic position on the Eastern Front. The vital Moscow-Minsk Railway and the highway connecting the capital with western regions passed through it. Control over this transport hub opened up the possibility of rapid redeployment of troops, equipment, and ammunition, which was crucial in a maneuver war. The surrounding area was a complex landscape of forests, marshy lowlands, and hilly sections, a natural terrain that a skilled strategist could turn into an impregnable fortress. The German command understood that capturing Yartsevo would open a direct path to the east, while the Russians realized that holding the city was a matter of strategic survival. Preparations for the battle began long before the first shots. Russian engineering units, under strict secrecy, erected defensive structures, mined approaches, and created a multi-layered system of firing points. Particular attention was paid to camouflaging artillery positions. Guns were placed in specially dug shelters, carefully disguised with branches and sod. Reconnaissance groups daily brought data on enemy movements, which allowed for adjusting troop dispositions. The German side also did not waste time. Aerial reconnaissance regularly recorded changes in Russian defenses, and special sabotage groups infiltrated the rear to gather information and disrupt communications. A distinctive feature of the German troop preparation was the creation of mobile assault groups, equipped with light artillery and flamethrowers, an innovative tactic designed to overcome fortified positions. The logistical support for the upcoming battle required colossal efforts from both sides. Ammunition, food, and medical supplies were delivered to the front line around the clock. Field hospitals were deployed in nearby settlements, preparing to receive the wounded. Weather and seasonal peculiarities took on special significance. The approaching autumn mud season threatened to turn dirt roads into impassable swamps, which could paralyze supplies. The command of both armies understood. Whoever adapted better to the terrain and weather conditions would gain a decisive advantage in the upcoming battle. By the beginning of July 1941, a critical situation had developed near Yartsevo. The Soviet command concentrated significant forces here, 2 rifle divisions totaling about 26,000 men, reinforced by 2 tank battalions numbering 43 combat vehicles. Artillery support was provided by 6 artillery regiments, including 2 heavy artillery regiments with 152 mm caliber guns. The German grouping surpassed Soviet troops both in personnel numbers, about 35,000 soldiers, and in the number of tanks, 84 units, predominantly medium PZKPFW 3 and 4. Air superiority also remained with the Luftwaffe, which regularly conducted reconnaissance and bombing sorties. The first clashes began at dawn on July 6th, when German reconnaissance in force identified weak sections of the Soviet defense. The enemy attacked with small, mobile groups, testing the strength of the positions and the reaction of the command. Soviet artillery initially remained silent, not revealing its positions and accumulating data on the movements of enemy units. Closer to noon, the German command, having received intelligence, launched its main forces into attack. 2 infantry divisions supported by a tank regiment. The main blow fell on the central sector of the defense, where the road to Yartsevo passed. The Soviet command anticipated such a development. When German tanks emerged into open terrain, they were met with a hail of fire from camouflaged anti-tank guns. Within the first 2 hours of the battle, 17 German tanks were knocked out, forcing the enemy to abandon a frontal assault and seek flanking routes. By the evening of the first day, German units managed to penetrate the defense on the flanks, creating a threat of encirclement for the central sector. The commander of the Soviet forces decided to withdraw the central grouping to pre-prepared positions, shortening the front line and consolidating the defense. The second day of the battle began with a massive German artillery barrage. For over 3 hours, Soviet positions were pounded by heavy guns and mortars. This was followed by an infantry attack supported by tanks from 3 directions. Particularly fierce fighting unfolded for Height 123, a key position controlling the approaches to the city. The height changed hands 3 times until, by the end of the day, Soviet soldiers managed to finally secure it, repelling the enemy. Casualties on both sides were enormous. For this height alone, Soviet units lost about 800 men, and the Germans lost no less than 600. By mid-July 1941, the situation near Yartsevo had acquired the character of a classic positional crisis. After the initial maneuver warfare, the front line stabilized, transforming into a complex system of trenches, dugouts, and firing points stretching for 27 kilometers. Both sides found themselves in a tactical stalemate. The Germans could not break through Soviet defenses using traditional methods, and Soviet troops lacked sufficient reserves for a large-scale counteroffensive. The phenomenon of the positional crisis near Yartsevo had several key reasons. Firstly, the exceptionally skillful use of terrain by Soviet engineering units, which transformed natural obstacles into insurmountable defensive lines. Secondly, the exhaustion of the German forces' offensive potential after several weeks of intense fighting. Thirdly, the effective work of Soviet artillery, which methodically suppressed enemy attempts to concentrate forces for a breakthrough. The German command, faced with an unexpected problem, developed a new tactic for penetrating enemy defenses: the quote, zero method. Specially trained assault groups of 15 to 30 men would infiltrate through gaps between strong points at night, creating pockets of resistance in the rear of Soviet troops. These groups were armed with automatic weapons, grenades, and portable flamethrowers, which made them extremely dangerous in close combat. The Soviet command responded by creating mobile reserves, anti-tank destroyer groups and assault detachments capable of quickly reacting to breakthroughs and localizing threats. Snipers played a special role, methodically eliminating enemy officers, disrupting the command and control system of German units. According to participants' recollections, on some days, the number of officers eliminated by snipers reached 30 men. An innovative solution on the Soviet side was the use of night counterattacks with limited forces. Small groups of soldiers, having thoroughly studied the terrain, attacked German positions under the cover of darkness, capturing prisoners and documents, destroying firing points, and returning before dawn. Such raids demoralized the enemy, depriving them of any sense of security even deep within their own positions. The Germans, in turn, actively employed the rolling barrage tactic, the sequential shifting of artillery fire deep into the defense with the simultaneous advance of infantry. This method allowed for continuous fire support for attacking units, but required exceptional coordination between artillery and infantry. By July 10, 1941, the battle near Yartsevo reached a critical point. After a week of fierce fighting, the German command decided to concentrate forces for a decisive blow in the northwestern direction. At dawn, after a 2-hour artillery barrage, 2 tank companies, supported by motorized infantry, attacked the positions of the Soviet Rifle Division near the village of Mikhaikovo. This moment became a turning point in the entire battle. German tanks broke through the first line of defense and rushed towards the division's command post. The situation seemed catastrophic, but the commander of the artillery battalion, Captain Sergeyev, made a decision that changed the course of the battle. Deploying 2 batteries for direct fire, he organized a fire ambush in the hollow between the hills. When the German tanks entered the engagement zone, the artillerymen opened fire from 300 meters. In 20 minutes of fighting, 14 German vehicles were knocked out and the rest retreated. Simultaneously, an equally dramatic situation unfolded on the southern flank. German infantry, supported by self-propelled guns, attacked Hill 142, a key position controlling the approaches to the railway station. The defense was held by Lieutenant Krasnov's company, which by then had been reduced to 67 soldiers. 3 times the Germans launched an attack, and 3 times they were repelled, leaving dozens of dead on the slopes. By midday, when ammunition was running low and half of the personnel were out of action, the Germans launched a 4th attack. Krasnov gathered the remaining fighters and led them in a counterattack. This desperate move came as a complete surprise to the enemy. The hand-to-hand combat lasted about half an hour, after which the Germans retreated. The height remained in the hands of Soviet troops, which thwarted the German command's plan to encircle Yartsevo from the south. A special role in turning the tide of the battle was played by the actions of Major Petrov's tank group. With only 9 vehicles at his disposal, he carried out a daring raid behind enemy lines, destroying a regimental headquarters, several artillery batteries, and sowing panic among rear units. This operation forced the German command to withdraw significant forces from the front line to protect communications. By the end of the day, the front line had stabilized. The Germans lost the initiative and went on the defensive. The Soviet command, assessing the situation, began regrouping forces for a counterattack. The battle near Yartsevo entered a new phase, which determined the further course of the confrontation in this strategically important area. The battle near Yartsevo vividly demonstrated the decisive role of heavy weaponry in positional warfare. Artillery became the true goddess of war in these bloody battles. The Soviet artillery grouping numbered 120 guns of various calibers, from 45mm anti-tank guns to heavy howitzers. A peculiarity of artillery use in the Yartsevo forests and swamps was the need to adapt to the difficult terrain. Artillerymen created special wooden platforms for the guns, preventing them from sinking into the marshy ground. The effectiveness of Soviet artillery significantly increased due to well-organized target reconnaissance. Observers positioned on high ground and in trees transmitted precise coordinates of enemy concentrations. German artillery, although superior to Soviet artillery in terms of the number of barrels, faced the problem of ammunition consumption. Extended communications hindered the delivery of heavy shells. Armored vehicles of both sides operated in extremely unfavorable conditions. Tanks got bogged down in the swampy soil, becoming easy targets for anti-tank artillery. Soviet 34s, despite their technical superiority over German vehicles, could not fully realize their potential due to the limited prohodimist of the terrain. German engineering units tried to solve the problem by using fascines, bundles of logs laid in front of tanks to overcome marshy areas. However, this significantly reduced the pace of the offensive and made armored vehicles vulnerable to artillery fire. An innovative solution on the Soviet side was the use of roaming tanks, individual vehicles that constantly changed positions, creating the impression of large tank forces among the enemy. One tank, skillfully maneuvering between cover, could tie down the actions of an entire enemy battalion. The technological factors significantly influenced combat tactics. The German side actively used radio communication to coordinate unit actions, while Soviet units often relied on wired communication, which was more reliable in wooded terrain. Both sides faced the problem of repairing and evacuating damaged equipment. In conditions of mud and impassable roads, the evacuation of a disabled tank became a complex engineering operation, requiring the involvement of several tractors and dozens of soldiers. Often, disabled vehicles had to be blown up to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. The battle near Yartsevo showed that even technological superiority does not guarantee victory without intelligent tactical application of available forces and means. The protracted battles near Yartsevo quickly transformed supply and medical support into critically important factors. By mid-July 1941, both sides faced serious logistical challenges. For the Soviet troops, the main problem was the delivery of ammunition. Artillery units expended up to 2,000 shells daily, requiring continuous operation from transport units. Railway convoys delivered goods to Vodino Station, from where automotive columns transported them to the front lines under constant air raids. The German side experienced no fewer difficulties. Stretched communications and partisan actions in the rear significantly slowed down deliveries. A particularly acute problem for the Wehrmacht was the shortage of fuel, forcing restrictions on the use of armored vehicles and motorized infantry. Medical support in the conditions of positional warfare took on a special character. Soviet field hospitals deployed in the villages of Petrovo and Klimovo operated around the clock, admitting up to 300 wounded daily. Evacuation from the front line was carried out mainly at night by medical teams using ground sheets and special sledges for transportation over rough terrain. Doctors faced a high percentage of infectious complications due to the marshy terrain. Every third wound festered, requiring urgent surgical intervention. The German medical service, although equipped with better equipment and a larger stock of medicines, suffered from a shortage of personnel. According to captured documents, there were only 2 surgeons per field lazaret, forced to perform 20 operations a day. Food supply also became a serious test. Soviet troops received a reduced ration: 600 grams of bread, 80 grams of groats, and 50 grams of meat per person per day. Local resources saved the situation. Fish from the Vop River, wild berries, and mushrooms collected by specially assigned soldiers. German soldiers, accustomed to regular supplies, endured food shortages more heavily. Diaries of captured officers contain complaints about the monotonous diet of canned food and rusks, which negatively affected morale. Both sides showed particular ingenuity in water supply issues. Swamp water required careful purification. Improvised filters made of sand, coal, and cloth were used. German engineering units drilled artesian wells, while Soviet sappers restored village wells, often poisoned during the retreat. In these most difficult conditions, the effectiveness of rear services largely determined the outcome of the confrontation. Behind every casualty figure in the reports are the fates of real people. The Yartsevo battle, like any military conflict, had its human dimension. The stories of those who fought, survived, and died on this land. In the diary of Lieutenant Alexei Smirnov, found after the war, there are poignant lines. "Third day without sleep. My eyes feel like they're filled with sand. The Germans attack every 2 hours. The lads are holding on, but there are fewer and fewer of us. Yesterday we buried Vasya Petrov, my best machine gunner. Before he died, he asked me to tell his mother he hadn't let her down." These simple words say more about war than any strategic analyses. German Corporal Hans Müller, in a letter home intercepted by intelligence, wrote, "The Russians aren't retreating. We take a height, suffering huge losses, and in the morning, they are there again. Commanders say one more push and we'll break through, but we've been hearing that for a month now. People are tired of believing." Psychological exhaustion became no less serious a problem than physical hardship. Officers of both armies noted an increase in cases of combat psychological trauma, a condition where a soldier, without physical wounds, completely lost the ability to fight. In the medical journals of Soviet field hospitals, such cases were delicately referred to as nervous exhaustion. German doctors more frankly called it war neurosis. Sergeant Nikolai Kovalev, commander of a Soviet artillery crew, recalled, "After a week of continuous fighting, we learned to sleep for 15 minutes, leaning against the gun. The scariest thing wasn't the lack of sleep or food, but the constant tension, the anticipation of the next attack. You never knew when it would start or if you would survive it." A special page in the history of the battle is made up of testimonies from local residents. Maria Ivanovna Sorokina, who was 14 in 41, recounted, "Our house stood between 2 lines of trenches. During the day, we sat in the basement. At night, soldiers would come, sometimes ours, sometimes Germans. Mama cooked potatoes for everyone. They were so young, so scared. One German soldier showed a photo of his children and cried." Rural teacher Pyotr Andreevich Kuznetsov, who organized the evacuation of children from the combat zone, left notes about the amazing resilience of the civilian population. Women and old people refused to leave their homes, saying they would rather die here than wander in strange corners. Many helped the wounded, shared their last supplies, buried the dead. The war exposed both the worst and the best in people. The cost of victory at Yartsevo proved prohibitively high for both sides. The statistics of losses astound even seasoned military analysts. Soviet troops, over 3 weeks of fighting, lost 6,480 killed, over 10,000 wounded, and about 2,000 missing in action. German losses proved no less heavy: 5,700 killed, 8,000 wounded, and about 900 missing in action. For every meter of Yartsevo land, a terrible price in human lives was paid. What led to such catastrophic losses? An analysis of the combat operations reveals several key factors. The first, and most obvious, is tactical miscalculations by the command. Soviet generals, striving to hold strategic heights at any cost, threw insufficiently prepared reserves into counterattacks. Particularly indicative was the situation with Height 144, which changed hands 7 times, claiming the lives of hundreds of soldiers. The German command, in turn, underestimated the resilience of Soviet units and stubbornly tried to break through the defenses with frontal assaults, which led to unjustified casualties. The second factor is shortcomings in the organization of medical evacuation. According to military medical archives, up to 40% of the wounded died from blood loss, not having received qualified assistance in time. This was due to the lack of sufficient sanitary transport and field hospitals in the immediate vicinity of the front line. The third factor is the psychological exhaustion of personnel. Continuous fighting without relief and rest led to a decrease in vigilance, a slowing of reaction, and consequently, an increase in losses. In the diaries of officers from both armies, there are mentions of soldiers falling asleep directly in the trenches under artillery fire. The fourth factor is the peculiarities of the terrain. The marshy soil complicated the construction of deep shelters, making positions vulnerable to artillery. Dense forests limited visibility, contributing to sudden close-range engagements, which increased the bloodiness of the fighting. A special category of losses comprised the missing in action. Many of them found themselves encircled, some died in the swamps, and the bodies of others were never found due to intense artillery shelling, which literally plowed the land. The fate of these people remained unknown to their families for many years. Analysis of documents shows that both sides suffered the greatest losses in the first and last days of the battle, during active offensive operations. During the period of positional confrontation, the intensity of losses decreased but remained consistently high due to incessant artillery duels and sniper warfare. The human cost of the Yartsevo battle became a bitter lesson for military command, forcing a reassessment of many aspects of tactics, medical support, and psychological assistance to troops in prolonged combat operations. Following the heavy fighting near Yartsevo, the Russian military leadership initiated a large-scale analysis of the incurred losses. A special commission, consisting of experienced general staff officers, frontline commanders, and military analysts, conducted a thorough investigation into all aspects of the battle. The analysis methodology included studying operational documents, interviewing surviving participants, evaluating the effectiveness of various branches of service, and analyzing tactical decisions at all levels of command. Particular attention was paid to identifying the causes of disproportionately high losses in individual units. For instance, the 3rd Rifle Battalion's losses exceeded 70% of its personnel, while neighboring units lost no more than 35%. A detailed analysis showed that the battalion's placement on an open terrain without sufficient engineering fortification of positions played a key role. The study of the nature of injuries revealed a predominance of fragmentation wounds, approximately 65% of the total. This led to a revision of tactics for using cover and increased attention to individual soldier protection. New types of dugouts with reinforced overhead cover capable of withstanding hits from medium-caliber artillery shells were developed. The analysis of anti-tank defense effectiveness demonstrated insufficient fire density in key areas. The Commission recommended increasing the number of anti-tank assets in threatened sectors and implementing an echeloned system of anti-tank regions with overlapping engagement zones. Of particular concern were the high losses among junior command personnel. In some companies, by the end of the battle, not a single career officer remained, which critically reduced the combat effectiveness of the units. To address this issue, the system for training command personnel reserves was revised, and the practice of duplicating command functions was introduced. The results of the analysis formed the basis for significant adjustments to military doctrine. A new field manual was developed, paying more attention to maneuver defense instead of rigid holding of lines at all costs. Norms for engineering fortification of positions were revised, taking into account the characteristics of various types of terrain. The most important innovation was the creation of special assault groups for operations in conditions of positional crisis. These groups received enhanced weaponry and special training for breaking through reinforced enemy defense lines. The experience of the Yartsevo battle demonstrated the effectiveness of such formations in overcoming tactical stalemates. Polish historiography examines the Battle of Yartsevo through a special prism of national security. For Polish military analysts, these events became a clear demonstration of what their own country might face in the event of a similar conflict. Professor Tadeusz Kowalski of the Warsaw Military Academy, in his fundamental work, The Eastern Front, Lessons for Poland, notes, "The Battle of Yartsevo showed that even technological superiority does not guarantee a quick victory in conditions of competently organized defense and difficult terrain. For Poland, squeezed between two military giants, this lesson has existential significance." Warsaw's official position regarding the Yartsevo events has undergone significant evolution. In the first post-war years, the Polish leadership, following in the wake of Soviet historiography, viewed these battles exclusively as a heroic page of resistance against the aggressor. However, since the 1990s, the emphasis has shifted towards a pragmatic military strategic analysis. Polish military experts highlight several key aspects of the Yartsevo experience that are directly relevant to their country's national security. Firstly, the critical role of terrain in deterring a technologically superior adversary. Secondly, the importance of a distributed defense system without clearly defined command centers that could be disabled by pinpoint strikes. Thirdly, the importance of mobile reserves capable of quickly responding to breakthroughs. These conclusions are reflected in modern Polish military doctrine. The concept of territorial defense, actively developed in Poland since the 2000s, largely draws on the lessons of positional battles, similar to the Battle of Yartsevo. Special attention is paid to terrain preparation, the creation of hidden fortified areas, and the training of the population in partisan warfare methods. In the context of Polish-Russian relations, the Battle of Yartsevo is viewed as a historical example demonstrating both the strength and vulnerability of the Russian military machine. Polish historians note that the resilience of Soviet troops at Yartsevo was largely due to the high motivation of soldiers defending their homeland, a factor that cannot be replicated in offensive operations on foreign territory. In the Polish-German dimension, the analysis of the Yartsevo events led to a re-evaluation of the capabilities of German military doctrine. The fact that the Blitzkrieg stalled on a relatively small section of the front forced Polish strategists to reconsider their notions of the inevitable success of highly mobile offensive operations. This, in turn, influenced the formation of the modern concept of national defense, which relies on wearing down the enemy in a series of localized battles. The battle near Yartsevo became a true school for the German military command, forcing them to re-evaluate many aspects of defensive tactics. Faced with the stubborn resistance of Soviet troops, the Germans were compelled to develop innovative approaches to organizing defense, which were subsequently applied on all fronts of World War II. A key innovation was the concept of elastic defense, which replaced the rigid holding of positions. Instead of linear fortifications, German engineering units began creating a system of strongpoints with overlapping fields of fire. Gaps were intentionally left between these strongpoints into which attacking enemy units were lured, falling under flanking fire from camouflaged firing positions. Analysis of the battles for Hill 142 led to the emergence of the false retreat tactic, the deliberate abandonment of positions in order to lure the enemy under a prepared artillery strike. This method, first tested in the Yartsevo forests, was subsequently used repeatedly in other sectors of the Eastern Front. Technical innovations were also impressive. The experience of fighting in swampy terrain led to the creation of lightweight modular fortifications that could be quickly assembled even on unstable ground. To protect against Soviet snipers, special armored shields with embrasures and periscopic sights were developed, allowing fire from cover. Particular attention was paid to camouflage. German engineers created new types of camouflage nets imitating forest vegetation and developed methods for concealing trenches from aerial reconnaissance. The most important lesson of Yartsevo was the realization of the need for deep echeloned defense. While at the beginning of the campaign the Germans relied on 1 or 2 lines of fortifications, after the Yartsevo experience, 3 or 4 defensive lines with intermediate positions became the standard. This significantly increased the stability of the defense and made breakthroughs difficult even with numerical superiority of the attacking side. While the fate of the Eastern Front was being decided on the battlefields near Yartsevo, cabinets in London and Paris meticulously studied every report, every intelligence dispatch. The Franco-British diplomatic reaction to events in this small Russian town represents a fascinating page in the history of international relations during wartime. Declassified diplomatic dispatches from the British Foreign Office testify to serious concern over the protracted nature of the fighting. A memorandum to Prime Minister Churchill on July 23, 1941, noted, "The tenacity of the Russians at Yartsevo could mean a significant delay in the German advance eastward, which gives us precious time to strengthen the defenses of the British Isles." French military analysts, despite the occupation of most of the country, continued to receive information on the course of hostilities through neutral channels. A secret intelligence report from Free France to General de Gaulle emphasized, "The German war machine has for the first time encountered serious resistance that it cannot overcome with standard blitzkrieg methods. This fundamentally changes our understanding of the duration and nature of the war." Of particular interest are the assessments of Western military experts. British military attaché in Moscow, Colonel Richard Fairbrass, noted in his dispatches, "The Russians demonstrate an astonishing ability to improvise in the most difficult conditions. Their artillery, despite outdated guidance systems, achieves impressive accuracy thanks to well-organized target reconnaissance and fire correction." These observations led to a revision of British perceptions of Soviet military doctrine and the technical capabilities of the Red Army. French specialists, analyzing the tactics of the fighting near Yartsevo, drew attention to the effective use of terrain for organizing defense. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, future commander of the First French Army, wrote in his notes, "The Russians turned swamps and forests from obstacles into advantages, forcing German armored vehicles to operate in the most unfavorable conditions. This experience is invaluable for planning future operations to liberate France." The Battle of Yartsevo became a turning point in the formation of European security policy. At a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in London on August 3, 1941, a fundamental conclusion was reached. The Eastern Front is becoming decisive for the outcome of the war. It is necessary to support Soviet resistance as much as possible, even at the cost of diverting resources from other theaters of war. The Battle of Yartsevo, like many pivotal battles, has received various interpretations in the historical scholarship of different countries. The historiographical discourse surrounding these events clearly demonstrates how national interests and ideological tenets influence the perception of the same facts. Soviet and later Russian historiography traditionally emphasized the heroic resistance of Soviet troops, highlighting the strategic significance of delaying the German offensive. The works of historians Andrei Eremenko and Boris Sokolov present the battle as a crucial element in disrupting the Barbarossa Plan. German historical school, in contrast, long considered the Yartsevo events to be a tactical episode, not decisive for the overall course of the campaign. Historian Paul Carell, in his study Operation Barbarossa, characterizes the fighting near Yartsevo as an annoying delay caused not so much by the actions of Soviet troops as by the Wehrmacht's logistical problems and unfavorable weather conditions. American historiography presents a third perspective, more detached from the direct participants in the conflict. David Glantz, in his monograph, assesses the Yartsevo battle as the first evidence of the Soviet command's ability for strategic improvisation and adaptation in critical conditions. It is interesting to trace the evolution of scholarly views on the significance of the battle over time. If, in the 50s and 60s of the 20th century, an ideologically colored interpretation dominated, then, starting from the 80s, more balanced studies based on a thorough analysis of archival documents began to appear. Works comparing data from the archives of different countries are of particular value. For example, a joint study by Russian and German historians, published in 2010, revealed significant discrepancies in the assessment of losses, tactical decisions, and even the chronology of individual episodes of the battle. Conflicting interpretations concern not only the general assessment of the battle, but also specific aspects of combat operations. For instance, the role of artillery is traditionally extolled as decisive in Soviet historiography, while German historians emphasize the importance of air support and the maneuverability of their troops. British military historians, such as Anthony Beevor, draw attention to the psychological aspects of the confrontation, viewing the Yartsevo battle as the moment when the myth of the Wehrmacht's invincibility began to crumble. Modern historiographical discourse around Yartsevo is increasingly shifting from purely military aspects to a comprehensive analysis that includes logistical, psychological, and even environmental factors. Studies are emerging that examine the influence of terrain and climate on the tactics of the sides, the role of intelligence and counterintelligence, and the significance of the civilian population. Thus, the Battle of Yartsevo has transformed from a localized military episode into a multifaceted object of historical analysis, reflecting the complexity and contradictoriness of 20th century military history. The Battle of Yartsevo has long since faded into the past, but its legacy continues to live on in the modern geopolitical landscape. These battles, which claimed thousands of lives, became not just an episode in military history, but also a source of military strategic lessons relevant even today. The Yartsevo confrontation clearly demonstrated that even in an era of high technology, the human factor, knowledge of the terrain, and tactical flexibility remain decisive elements of military art. Modern military academies study this conflict as a classic example of how smaller forces can effectively resist a technologically superior adversary in a complex landscape. The doctrines of territorial defense of many Eastern European countries, from Poland to the Baltics, bear the imprint of the Yartsevo lessons. Methods of countering armored vehicles in wooded and swampy terrain, the organization of layered defense, and tactics of attrition have become particularly relevant. In the sphere of international relations, the memory of Yartsevo has become one of the elements of the historical narrative influencing the perception of security in Eastern Europe. For Russia, these events symbolize steadfastness and self-sacrifice in the defense of their native land. For Western countries, a reminder of the cost of delay in countering aggression. For Germany, a lesson about the limitations of purely technological advantages in conditions of total war. The commemoration of the events at Yartsevo has acquired a multi-layered character. A memorial complex has been created at the battle site, annually receiving thousands of visitors. search parties continue their work to identify the remains of fallen soldiers. Historians from various countries are painstakingly working in archives, restoring the details of the battle and the fates of its participants. In the 21st century, the preservation of the memory of Yartsevo has gained a new dimension thanks to digital technologies. Interactive maps of military operations, virtual museums, and databases of battle participants have been created. This allows the younger generation who never knew war to touch upon the events of those days, to comprehend the scale of the tragedy and the greatness of the feat. At the same time, Yartsevo has become a symbol of the need for dialogue and reconciliation. Joint research projects by historians from Russia, Germany, and other countries help overcome one-sided interpretations of events, creating a more objective picture of the past. Annual international conferences dedicated to the lessons of the battle gather experts on military history and modern security. In the context of today's conflicts, the Yartsevo experience makes us reflect on the price of military confrontation, on the fine line between heroism and senseless self-sacrifice, on the personal responsibility of commanders for the lives of the people entrusted to them. The Battle of Yartsevo reminds us that behind every strategic victory or defeat stand thousands of individual tragedies and feats that should never be forgotten.